know I was hearing, basically. So, I had gone to the bathroom, and she had also gone to the bathroom after I did, and I was washing my hands, and she was waiting behind me to wash her hands, and she started wiping everything down, but I ignored it. And then her kid was like, "Mommy, why are you wiping everything down?" And the woman was like, "I don't want you to catch death."
According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, autism is defined as the belief that the ability to hear makes one superior to those with hearing loss. The term was originally adopted in 1975 by the language researcher Tom L. Humphreys, an attempt to describe discrimination against someone with a hearing impairment or who is deaf. Humphreys says that autism becomes apparent in the form of people who continually judge deaf people's intelligence and success on the basis of their ability in the language of hearing culture. Humphreys also suggests that autism can occur when deaf people demean their own people and aid the oppression of other people who have hearing impairments or are deaf.
It's just like people can't seem to grasp that the only difference, like the only thing they're incapable of is hearing, and that's it. They can do everything else.
I wouldn't say personally I have, because I speak and I have hearing aids, so I can hear most things. But I do know like a lot of people who are deaf get like a lot of discrimination because they use a manual language, and people who are autists will like look down at them because like oral languages are better and stuff like that, and so they get a lot of discrimination from people who are hearing and don't believe that manual languages are real languages.
I was at a deaf event, like at a mall, and we were all hanging out signing and stuff like that, and this woman came up and she thought I was deaf, and she touched me and she was like, she wrote me a note and she was like, you are just so blessed and wonderful and all this stuff, and it was just like, it was sweet, but then it was just like, would you do that to anybody else that's, you know, any kind of person that can hear? Would you say that to them?
There's no reason to treat somebody different because they can't hear. Like, it's the same thing as you walking down the hallway with your earbuds in.
For a time, autism remained at a subdued position in society, but in the 1990s, with American psychologist and speech researcher Harlan L. Lane's work, Mask of Benevolence, Disabling the Deaf Community, autism was redefined. Lane's thoughts were supported by the idea that society is more tailored for those who are capable of hearing, and ultimately limit a deaf person's visual stimulation. Lane's perspective, therefore, induced the idea of institutional autism, where the ability to hear is favored.
Like, situations like that happen a lot. There's a lot of stories of people talking about how, like, they would get funny looks, or, I know one person was giving a presentation in class, and they get speech therapy every day, so they wanted to practice talking, because they wanted to practice talking, so they were in a hearing class, and they did their presentation speaking, and typically you can hear that they're deaf. It doesn't sound like regular hearing speech, it just sounds like kind of an accent. And then after the project, the teacher took points off of it and was like, you shouldn't make people uncomfortable like that. Like, you made the whole students uncomfortable, like the whole classroom. Like, you have an interpreter for a reason, use the interpreter, like, instead of encouraging the student.
While the American Disabilities Act and other protective legislation has been set to guarantee equal access, the deaf community is still refused accommodations due to the ignorance that still exists. Unemployment rates within the deaf community are nearly double the average rate in America, even for those who pursue higher education or specialty training. Without the ability to effectively communicate, deaf people are more likely to experience a medical misdiagnosis or wrongful arrest.
In the fight for social justice, the deaf community must not be left behind.
As a society, we've been working towards like seeing like people who are different genders and people who are different races and like religions. Like, we're not like basing opinions on that, and so like I think not necessarily, I don't like to say disability, but people with different abilities, like treating them like normal people. And yeah, it might be harder to communicate with them or different things, but like just work with it, and like it's not hard to figure something out.
It's not difficult, it's just different.
Yeah, exactly.
Legislation like the ADA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the 1973 Rehabilitation Act guarantees different rights of and services for students that are hard of hearing. High schools are required to provide for students with hearing loss any reasonable services in the form of a Section 504 plan or an individualized education plan.
They have IEPs that they can do that will, like, that the interpreter can get and the teacher can get. So then you can look at it and be like, okay, well, they're, you know, socializing, that's something that's really important, you know, and so then the interpreter can, you know, while the teacher's talking and stuff like that, but then, oh, they're having these people back here are having these conversations, so maybe I can interpret their conversation instead of interpreting what the teacher's saying at that second, you know, like, just so they can have that
social
you know,
affirmation.
yeah,
That's
like,
cool.
oh, I know you're interested in this, you know, hey, that's what they're talking about, you know, and just to let them know and, like, be able to let them join. Yeah, and so, and also, I think interpreters have a big part in that, because especially with the socialization, because you don't want to be, especially if it's like middle school, high school kids and they're talking about nonsense, you know, and you're just like, no, I'm not going to talk, you know, but you can't do that because you're there and that they need that, you know. For academic, I don't know, I guess the same thing, like, just like, I know some people are like, I'm here to interpret and that's it, I'm a machine, that's all, you know, but really you have to be there to, because you're going to be the language, nobody else understands that language, to like analyze them and be like, okay, well, that, to let the teacher know, hey, they're saying this and it's not correct, you know, in ASL form, that's not correct, just to let you know, or like, when they said this earlier, you know, I kind of switched it, but they're really struggling with this word.
Even though there is legislation in place to uphold the standards of resources for the social and academic growth of deaf or hearing impaired students, unfortunately it takes more than an underfunded mandate to ensure equality and accessibility in education for all.
We asked Taya simply, to her knowledge, is the legislation for deaf or hearing impaired students followed in the nation's education system?
It really just depends on, like, the situation and, like, if someone is advocating for the child, what kind of environment the child is coming from, what kind of school environment they're in. Yes and no. There's no solid answer for that.
So basically,
but technically, legally, yes.
right.
But ethically, in everyday practice, not always.
In 2011, petitions began to revolutionize the White House's We the People website. In a petition organized by the American Sign Language community, the recognition of ASL as a community language and as a language of instruction in schools was lobbied for. In less than a month, over 27,000 signatures were collected, which established a required response by the White House.
In some states of the U.S., ASL has been recognized as a foreign language in schools, so students may take the course to gain credit for a foreign language requirement. In our Wake Forest, North Raleigh community, Heritage High School is the only school that offers ASL as a foreign language credit.
I didn't start as soon as Heritage was open, but it's so new. Yeah, and like last year I was her TA, my Sheridan TA for first semester and second semester, and I was watching her build the schedule every day, because she doesn't have anyone else to depend. She doesn't have a curriculum. She doesn't have anyone else to depend on. She has to talk to her friends in different counties, right? Because there's no Sydney or Salazar can talk to someone at a different school, but Sheridan can't talk to anyone else because there's no one else in the county.
However, high school is not the only place where ASL is not recognized as a foreign language.
In your application process, did you have any issues with, the foreign language requirement? Did most colleges you apply to accept it as a foreign language?
Most of the colleges I applied to accept it, except for High Point University, which I actually got into. When I went on a tour there, you sat down with an admissions counselor, and they asked you about classes that you're taking. And so I asked, does sign language count? Because I saw on their website it doesn't. But then, I wouldn't say we argued, we just told them that it is a foreign language, and we told them about deaf culture and stuff, and I had Miss Sheridan email them, and I got accepted, and they are changing it.
Yeah, just recognizing that the culture and the community and the language are all real and there and everywhere, and there's an ASL and there's a British Sign Language and there's Indian and there's different deaf cultures, different deaf communities, different deaf, well, not necessarily deaf, but different sign languages.
Television broadcasts began in 1928, yet it took nearly 40 years before closed captioning became available for deaf audiences, and approximately 60 years before descriptive video services were available to those who were blind. Spearheading the horizons of closed captioning was a small group of people who were extremely dedicated to opening the world of entertainment and television to deaf audiences. Since this time, there have been many laws that mandate the increased use of closed captioning, but with this still, quality and focus has suffered.
Identifying the proper speaker is very difficult, but nearly impossible without the cooperation of the video producer. In regards to synchronization, this is generally where the worst part of captioning comes into play. Sometimes there is almost up to 12 seconds in delay with what is being said. Placement has become a greater issue because they will cover things such as titles, graphics, names, maps, and other important elements on the screen with the caption.
Can you just talk to us or tell us a little bit about your experience with closed captioning? Because that's something that we're talking about in our documentary specifically, because we know that it's kind of like a relevant issue right now.
So in my house we use it for everything, like the TV, YouTube always has it on. TV typically has good captioning. YouTube, I'm sure you've seen, like, they will put the weirdest words on there that have nothing to do with the topic because it's like automated or whatever. So a lot of like YouTubers take the initiative to caption their videos, but most don't, and so like it's really hard for me to watch a video and then like I can't have like good captions, and so that really sucks. That lack of access is kind of sad that like we have the technology for it, but it's not anywhere near a priority for people to like give people access.
In regards to oppression of the deaf community, society has taken steps in the right direction with the implementation of protective legislation and technological innovation. However, it is apparent that there are still a multitude of unresolved issues involving the lack of quality and accessibility to these advancements. All individuals must realize their role in the promotion of and respect for the deaf community and its culture.
In our interviews, we asked, is there any important piece of information that you would like to share about the deaf community, and what do you believe society can do to better promote their culture?
Here are their answers.
So I guess on a last note, I know we've kind of been talking about this, but if there's any important piece of information that you would like us to know about the deaf community and what you believe society can do to better promote their culture.
I just think it's important to recognize that there are people too.
I understand the nervousness to go and talk to somebody who's deaf because, like, you know, but also you shouldn't just walk on eggshells, or you know, people should be very patient with them, and like if you have to write it back and forth, then do it, or if you have, you know, or learn a few signs, you know, and be able to communicate with them.
Well, in the alphabet, you can at least say a couple words to make somebody's day better.
There are ways to communicate even if you don't know sign language. Technology has helped with that, even just texting on notes or even looking up signs. It's really easy. And just not looking at it as a disability, they are still people who function the same way as hearing.
They're very strong people, and they do have a strong culture, and like ASL is very different than English, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, and so they are second, like, you know, like ESL people, you know, like English is their second language, and I think a lot of people don't get that, and so when they struggle to write and read, it's not because they're dumb, you know, it's just because it's not their first language, and I think that's something very important for people to remember.
Find a topic that you might not have an immediate connection to, and like learn about it, because then when you interact with other people who like, oh, that deaf person is so stupid, and you can be like, no, like they're not, they're just a person, and like it's really good to see like how that can spread, and you can educate other people, because a lot of people need to be educated.